Hey guys, and how about we talk Code Geass? I'm Grestar, and this is another anime that I would highly recommend. So obviously enough, Code Geass is an anime, so for those of you who despise anime, this series is probably not for you. But if you are interested, then the first part of this video is going to be relatively spoiler-free, so feel free to stick around. This bit's for you. And don't worry, I'll make note of when I go into spoiler territory, so you should be pretty safe. According to the wiki, there are 3 seasons, but the 3rd season is mentioned to be a side story, like something that happens concurrently with the main 2 seasons, and those are the only ones I watched. I don't know if season 3 has an anime, or if it's being made now, or if it's manga or something, but it's not the main thing. I haven't seen it, so I'm not gonna make note of it. If you've seen it, that's awesome. But yeah, I'm gonna focus on the main 2 series, or seasons. They have 25 episodes each of the standard, 20 to 25 minute length. So that's good to know. And if you're curious about the genre, I looked up on Analinks, the website for you guys, and it said action, drama, mecha, military, police, psychological, school life, sci-fi, slice of life, superpower. So yeah, I mean, if any of those strike your fancy, this might be interesting for you. But another thing you should keep in mind is what might bother your sensitivities, because different people have different sensitivities, whether it's nudity or violence, etc. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about those before we get into the story itself. So, to begin, Code Geass has a bit of fan service, like a fair amount of fan service in it, and apparently some nudity too. I say apparently because it actually didn't occur to me that it did have nudity until I really started thinking about some of the scenes and googled it to be safe. Like googled, does Code Geass have nudity kind of thing? And yeah, it actually does. But what I like to think that means is it just goes to show how little the anime focuses on those, bits of nudity. Like they're just there because that's how the story's going. It's not there for the sake of like pleasing anyone. It's not a perverted kind of thing, I mean, the fan service is one thing where it might kind of dwell on some things a little bit and you're like, it didn't exactly have to go that way, but alright. But that wasn't bad, and that didn't involve nudity, just kind of scantily cladness, like swimsuit kind of stuff. But no nudity in the fan service there, so it didn't dwell along on that. But if you absolutely do not want to see any breasts, any butts, this show has some, so just be aware of that. Again, I don't think that it's like sexualized, it's just a thing. So take that for what you will. But aside from just, sexual kinds of stuff, this anime also has some pretty big focus on a lot of rather dark topics, like there's suicide, there's drug use, there's war and killing, and just the obvious betrayal and like loss of family and love and that kind of stuff. So it actually goes pretty intense at sometimes, just be aware of that too. And like when someone dies, this anime doesn't go out of its way to hide the blood. Not that it's a gore fest, but it is there. So if you're particularly young or otherwise sensitive, you may not want to watch this anime. However, if that stuff does not bother you, then yeah, I'd recommend it. I would. I really enjoyed this anime. Alright, so I'm just gonna talk a little bit about whatever comes to mind. Really only going into detail about what's in the first like 5 episodes maybe. So I don't really consider that too much of a spoiler, considering again it's a 50 episode series. 5 episodes really isn't that many. I mean, you learn about all this stuff pretty early on. If you really don't want to hear any of it, I guess this is where you'll have to go. I'll miss you, I love you, but go check out the anime. It was a good time for me. If you're fine with minor details, then here we go. So the main character of Code Geass is Lelouch Lamperouge, and really quickly, I should probably add that I watched Code Geass in Japanese, like Japanese dubbing with English subtitles kind of deal, So if my pronunciations of anything or my understandings of anything are kind of weird, that's probably why. But yeah, Lelouch is the main character, and he's just, the brilliant genius high school student. And I'll get this comparison out of the way. A lot of people compare him to Light Yagami from Death Note, and I could easily see why. I'd watched Death Note before I watched Code Geass, and within the first few episodes, I was like, wow, these two are very similar. So I can easily see why, but I would argue that Lelouch is a better character in a number of ways, mostly morally. So if you wanted to like Light Yagami from Death Note, but you just kind of couldn't because of how psychotic he was and the fact that he was a serial killer who wanted to be God, then Lelouch is a step up, so be excited for that. Oh, and if you're curious about this really quick too, I just got back from a local Comic-Con, so I just haven't taken it off yet. That also means I'm tired. But yes, Lelouch is the main character. He's brilliant. You see it really early on. Like, I think the first time it actually introduces him on the screen, he goes in and he takes on a noble in a chess match. And he's all like, yeah, I can turn this around, because he went up to some, like, a game already in progress, and I think one guy was losing. He's like, yeah, I can turn this around in a few moves, or some amount of minutes or something, and he did. And it was really cool. And then you see him later on walking out, and he won, and he and his buddy are kind of just like laughing about it, rubbing it in and everything. But then you get to see that Lelouch is also a genuinely good guy, because they're going down the road on a little motorcycle, you know, with the kind of passenger car, which is just awesome in and of itself. And they see this, I think it was a wreck. Like, you know, there was a big police chase or whatever, but then a vehicle had wrecked, and so Lelouch gets out, and he runs to investigate to make sure that everyone's okay, but he accidentally, like, falls in or something. It's been a while. It's been a couple months since I've seen the anime, so forgive me if I misremember. But he falls in, blah, blah, blah. It turns out that it was a terrorist vehicle, and they were harboring some kind of, I don't know, something that, you know, the government, the military, the royal, no, not royal, Holy Britannian Empire that they were after. And so when they found him, they weren't too happy. Because as some background, which I probably should have provided earlier, the anime actually starts with, like, a bit of narration about how 7 years ago, I think it was, the Holy Britannian Empire declared war on Japan and then, you know, conquered it afterward. And so actually, instead of calling it Japan, it's called Area 11 now. It's kind of a mockery thing. And even more than that, the Japanese people who live there can no longer call themselves Japanese, but rather have to call themselves 11s. So, like, to add insult to injury kind of thing, they were stripped of their identities, and it was just, it's bad. And so when I say terrorists, what I mean is that these are Japanese people fighting for their rights, basically, fighting against the Britannian Empire, because that was the big threat at the time. Obviously enough, since they conquered Japan. But yes. So yeah, Lelouch is there, and the Britannian military, or the little squad that found him or whatever, they saw that he was in a, you know, a school uniform and everything, because he was, and it was a Britannian uniform, so hey, that should be props to him and all that. But they didn't really care too much. They figured since he was with the terrorists, he probably was working with them or something to that effect, and so they tried to kill him. But the thing that the truck was carrying was a girl, a mysterious girl, you know, but she jumped in front of a bullet for Lelouch, and you know, right in the head, so she died. But then they were gonna shoot Lelouch anyway, and then she woke up again, and she grabbed his hand, and then there was kind of this telepathy moment where she was all like, I have this contract for you, take it if you want to live, take it if you want power. And so he did, and I would recommend against that really quick. You don't want to sign contracts if you don't know the terms or anything, because she was just kind of like, yeah, sign this, buddy. And so he did. But it saved his life. He from signing that contract, he got a power that's called a Geass, and what he did next was really cool. I'll save that. But anyway, so he got away from the Britannian military people who were after him and whatnot. And it turns out that the girl who gave him the power and who survived and everything ended up back where he was staying. Not necessarily his house, but back where they were staying. The anime explains it. And says that she has to stay near the person who she has the contract with. So, you know, there you go. The main character is stuck with another person. But she's obviously important, so we're going to go with that. But then within the next couple episodes, Lelouch reveals through flashbacks, basically, that he has vowed revenge against the Holy Britannian Empire, because Lelouch and his sister, his younger sister Nunnally, were actually Britannian royals. They were royalty at the time, you know, prince and princess. You know, among a bunch of other princes and princesses, so it wasn't super special, but it was still a thing. But what happened was that his mother was murdered, and he suspected that it wasn't the Japanese, or was it the Japanese at the time? He suspected anyway that it was part of the royal doing, that, you know, someone within the family had done it, and when he went to the king for answers, the king didn't do anything, didn't give any answers, and so Lelouch is like, fine, I don't want to be prince then, and so he and his sister were moved to Japan, and then later on Japan was conquered. I'm giving you all sorts of explanation, like, out of order, so I apologize for that. But hey, you get to hear me ramble, so that's good, right? Anyway, along with their mother dying, Nunnally was paralyzed, I believe, from the waist down, and supposedly she lost her sight. I don't remember how. What I remember is that she lost her sight from the trauma of seeing her mother die, which I will call bullcrap on. I don't think you can lose your sight simply from seeing something you don't like. but I'll go with it for the sake of the anime. Alright, so Lelouch hates his dad, the Emperor of Britannia. That's a pretty big thing. And he vowed revenge against them, you know, and wanted to find out what actually happened to his mother, who really did it, who called the shots and everything. And so with his new power, he decided that he could finally do something about all of this. And so he actually goes and ends up helping the terrorists, you know, the Japanese people fighting for their rights and everything. And ends up, due to his brilliance, becoming their leader, you know, their strategist, their tactician. And he doesn't reveal himself to them, but takes on the masked identity of Zero. It's kind of like a masked vigilante thing, but again, he's not like a superhero, you know, no Daredevil or anything. But it's really cool. So with that bit of exposition and, you know, background, I hope that you're interested in this anime, and I hope that you will go check it out. So this part, all this has been for people who haven't seen the anime and are interested in it, and this part ends now. Before I move on to spoiler territory, I just want to say two things. First, I thought that they took some risks when they started the second season, both with how they actually started the second season and with just events that took place and changes that were happening during the second season. And honestly, as I was watching the last episode, I was thinking, well, it's too late now, they can't turn it around for me. But then, everything that I disliked about the second season was just completely washed away by what happened at the end, and I cried. Something happened, and I cried. So it was a really good ending. It totally made it for me, and I really do recommend this anime. So yeah, I am going to talk about spoiler things now, after my countdown, but yes, be prepared. If you don't want to hear spoilers, leave! The next part will be about people who have seen the anime. Specifically, I mean, if you haven't seen it and you don't mind spoilers, feel free to keep watching. But this next bit will definitely contain spoilers. So if you are going to stop here, thank you for watching. You have 5 seconds to leave. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1! Alright, let's keep talking. Now, I don't know how much that I have to say because I didn't exactly write this out or anything. I'm gonna say what comes to mind, what stuck with me, because again, it has been a couple months, but you know, these things are things that have actually stuck with me since watching the anime. They won't all be complaints, they won't all be positive, and they won't all make sense, I'm sure. Or there could be simple answers that I just missed or forgot, so bear with me there. And I am gonna jump around within the timeline, so I will apologize in advance, but here we go. First, I think I'll just address some of my feelings about some of the characters. So we'll begin with Suzaku Kururugi, because he played a really big part in this anime, being Lelouch's best friend, and basically like the big enemy to Zero, and you know, the Japanese terrorists, you know, the Black Knights as they came to be called, because, you know, he was a great writer of nightmares, which were, you know, the mecha things, though again, this is mostly for the people who have seen the anime, so if I don't explain a lot, I do apologize, but yes. Suzaku Kururugi, he just had a really troubled past, and I was really up and down about him. You know, at some points I liked Suzaku, at some points I hated Suzaku, so like, it basically went, I liked him, I hated him! Oh, you're pretty cool, okay. You know, like, it was kind of like that, because, you know, at the beginning we see him, he helps, well, he tries to spare Lelouch's life, because he was part of the Britannian people who found him initially, when he was with Shitsu, or C2, as you might know her better if you watch the English dub. I think that's what she was called there, but in Japanese she was Shitsu, or CC. So yeah, but Suzaku, he was really cool. It was good to see like how good at fighting he was, even outside of the mecha, you know, the nightmare. But just, he was a total boss, he really was. But what was so bad was just when he got so stubborn. And if you're like me, you were rooting for Lelouch because, well, I was rooting for, you know, Light Yagami too during Death Note, but Lelouch actually, like, he had a good reason for fighting. It wasn't like Light, you know, I want to become a god so that I can rule over my perfect world. But Lelouch was, I want to be powerful enough to change the world to make it better for my little sister. Like, it was so selfless. So I really, you know, I was rooting for Lelouch, and Suzaku just kept getting in the way. And I could see his reasoning with things, but at the same time, it was just like, you could easily flip it and go the other way, and he was just so stubborn about it all. And even when good points were made against him, it was just kind of, you know, thrown back in like Lelouch's face or whatever. And, it was bad. It got especially worse after Euphemia, however you want to say it. I think I was saying Euphemia, or that's what I recall hearing. It was just especially bad with that. because of just the whole like, oh, I'm in love with her and you killed her kind of thing. Again, you're in spoiler territory. If you didn't want to hear that, it's your own fault. I mean, because I was frustrated with him before with just how stubborn he was, sticking to his morals and everything, but at the same time I can understand that because he was sticking to his morals. But at that point, it was just like this blind rage out of love kind of thing. So yeah, it was kind of hard to like Suzaku at times. But again, in the end, I did like him again. And I guess that might be kind of selfish on my own part too, because it was basically only once Suzaku kind of fell in line with what I wanted him to go with. Instead of just coming to like him as a character, you know, without him having to change, so to speak. But hey, I'm just saying how I felt. I liked him, and then I didn't like him, and then I didn't like him more, and then he was okay again. So he ended up being a likable character to me, and that's that. I will also add with Suzaku, before I move away, that his relationship with Lelouch was really interesting, because, you know, you have that whole best friends thing, but then they are suspicious of each other, or Lelouch actually knows who, you know, Kururugi is, Suzaku. But, you know, Suzaku doesn't know for sure if Lelouch is Zero, the head of the Black Knights, the head of the organization that he is so, you know, that he's fighting against, like, really hard. And so the suspicion is there, but at the same time, he doesn't want it to be true, so he's trying not to see, you know, the proof or whatnot that's available to him. Ooh, I'll tie this in to another character, Mao. Mao was another person that Shitsu had chosen to sign a contract, and, okay, I guess okay, this is where it's hard to jump around. I guess I'll just finish up with Suzaku really quick. It was really cool how Suzaku got to work together with Lelouch to save Nunnally from the clutches of Mao. That's really all I had to say there. Now I can actually focus on Mao, so let's do it. Mao was just Mao was just the sad character because, like, he didn't choose to have his powers behave the way they did, of course. If you've seen the anime, then you know what I mean. And it just drove him crazy. And so I didn't like him because he was such a bad character in the ruthless kind of way, where he was crazy and he would do whatever he wanted to do in order to get his way kind of thing. But at the same time, he provided, I think, like, two of the coolest scenes from the anime, in my opinion. Again, the one with Lelouch and Suzaku, and the one, I believe that was after that, with just Lelouch, playing on the big screen with, you know, the police force backing him up in the end. That was awesome. But now to have that little tidbit tie into one of my bigger complaints, and that is that Shitsu did not warn Lelouch about how the Geass could change. Because it wasn't a surprise to Shitsu. Like, she knew that the Geass could, like, or would even change eventually, I'm pretty sure. And she didn't share this information with Lelouch. And so, because she didn't share it, and for whatever reason, I still don't know this to this day after seeing, you know, the whole anime, though again, I've forgotten things. She just didn't. I don't know why. And then because she didn't, Euphemia at one point in the anime offered up a kind of compromise where there would be a designated area for, you know, the 11s, the Japanese, to go, where there could actually be Japanese again, where they would be treated as equals. It was their own little segment by Mount Fuji or something, I don't know. But yeah, and Lelouch, as Zero, actually had agreed to help Euphemia create this kind of utopia for the Japanese, which I'm not sure why exactly, because he seemed so very much against it, and then he just kind of turned around and was like, alright, I'll help you. And I don't know if Euphemia actually convinced him. I thought at the time that he was going to trick her somehow. But what he ended up doing, he told her about the Geass and everything, and he made a joke and was like, yeah, if I command someone, then they'll do it. Like, if I say, kill all the Japanese, then you'd have to kill all the Japanese. That was his example. His example was kill all the Japanese. And the thing that Shitsu did not tell him about Geass is that they can go out of control, that they can change. And his in particular meant that it would go beyond, like, or without him wanting it to. It would activate when he didn't mean for it to activate. And so when he just said, as the example, go kill all the Japanese, Euphemia was like, ah, well, alright. And, like, definitely not that nonchalantly. But she went out, she started murdering all the Japanese people that had gathered there before her for the grand opening, basically, of, you know, the safe district for Japanese. And so it was just one of those really stupid things where it was like, I saw no reason for this character to withhold this vital information. You could have at least warned Lelouch about it. And then at the same time, it was a stupid moment because Lelouch used one of the dumbest examples that could have crossed his mind. And You know, it could have been anything. It could have been like, so if I said, I order you to kiss me, then you'd have to kiss me. And then Euphemia would have kissed him, and that would have been it. Like, that would have been fine, and then the designated area of Japan would have stayed that way, and all would have been, well, you know, relatively okay as far as it went with the plot at that point. But no, just because the plot kind of demanded it, that he had to make such a demand, you know, even unintentionally, and Shitsu just hadn't said anything, and I just thought that that part was stupid. Again, it definitely led to more things in the anime, like a lot branched off because of that, a lot happened because of that, but it was just unnecessary and therefore felt forced. Wow, sometimes I start on something and then I end somewhere else, and I'm like, where did I begin? So I guess to gather my thoughts a little bit more, yeah, I was upset with Shitsu for what happened there. But I did end up understanding, I had more complaints along those lines, but I ended up understanding a little bit more why she would withhold some information from Lelouch when it turns out that she was in on the Emperor's secret, basically. You know, Emperor had a secret plan, and she knew about it, because she could only die in like a very specific way, which honestly, I do forget how. Yeah. So I did understand after learning about that, like, oh, that's why she didn't share this or do this or that kind of thing. But the whole bit with Euphemia and not telling Lelouch that the Geass could just start happening whenever, that part was still stupid. Honestly, I think those two things are my biggest and some of my only complaints, really. The other things are really minor, but that is my biggest complaint. Shitsu withholding information and Lelouch using the stupidest phrase. Because again, it was necessary, I guess, for what the writers of the story had in mind. It was just forced and stupid. I don't think that he would really have used that as his example. I feel like Shitsu had no reason to withhold that information when she has told him other things. Even though she has been really stingy with information, she has told him other things, and that was really useful, and it could have gotten them into a lot of trouble. So, most of the complaining is out of the way, I think. Just to talk about other characters then and my feelings toward them, because that's how this all started, and then I ended up on those other trains of thought. Kallen Stadtfeld, or Kozuki, I'm pretty sure was her Japanese name. She was a really awesome character, I thought. I loved her. For a while on my phone, she was one of my background images, just because after watching the anime, I'm like, oh, you're so cool and quite attractive. And to be fair, or in my defense or in my offense, I don't know which one exactly, she was the main focus, I believe, of the fan service. There were some other characters, but you got to see it a lot with Kallen. And that's not why I liked her. I won't say it didn't help at all, but that's not why. No, she was a genuinely cool and well-rounded character, I thought. She had a good backstory that really gave meaning to what she was doing, that really helped you understand why she did all that she did, and we got to see her go through all this conflict with whether she should trust Lelouch, whether she was doing the right thing, whether they as a whole were heading in the right direction, whether they would accomplish their goal, whether, you know, all this stuff. So she was just really cool. She was, you know, another mecha pilot that basically rivaled Suzaku. And again, Suzaku was awesome. So Kallen was in turn awesome. There's not a lot more to say. I really liked Kallen as a character. I wish I could have seen her more. Yes, I did kind of want to see her and Lelouch more together, but there were a couple scenes that, you know, made me happy with that, with, you know, a trip and fall kind of, you know, like, oh, you're right above me, let's stand here awkwardly for a second and then you can get off. And then there was one point where she kissed him, and thank you, like, I was waiting for that. But that's Kallen. Nunnally was just a nice character because, of course, she was what Lelouch was fighting for, so she was a very necessary character. Without Nunnally, the anime would have been completely different. And she was very friendly, very sweet, and she did want the best for everyone. She did. She genuinely did. And it was hard to dislike her, and I don't think I ever did dislike her, but near the end, with stuff that she did, it did make me frustrated because even when she found out that Lelouch was Zero, she fought against him, and she thought that he was wrong, and pretty sure she insulted him, or at least in that kind of way where only a sibling can insult you, even if it's not a blatant insult. And so, you know, finding family ties important, I guess that affected me a little more maybe than it would have other people. But yeah, she definitely played a big part. If you're kind of wondering why I'm so just kind of all over the place, aside from just I start talking about something and then train of thought, I did write down character names in a Word document, and so it's kind of like I read that and a thought is triggered and then I talk about it. So yes, again, apologies for it being random. But now for Euphemia. So yes, Euphemia Libritannia. my first impression of her was that she was an idiot. Because we see her just walking around in the city. She bumps into Suzaku. I think she tied a bunch of things and went out the window kind of deal. You know, like she was running from something, escaping from something. She just seemed kind of like a bit of a ditz, you know? She was a ditzy girl, which isn't a bad thing, but I'm allowed to call her an idiot because of that. But what really makes me add an idiot, or like refer to as an idiot, because I know that has a really negative connotation where ditzy might be kind of like, oh, affectionate kind of thing. It's endearing, but idiot. Because in the and I think of the episode where she was introduced, there was a mecha fight going on, and when they were about to like fire at each other, she ran in the center of it to stop that. So she just completely risked her life when I don't think there was a giant risk in the fight. I could be wrong, but either way, if you're a princess, don't run in the middle of mechas fighting. Even if they did recognize who you were, they might not be able to stop their attack in time. She could have died really easily there. I'm pretty sure, actually, if I'm remembering correctly, I think she would have died, but one of them jumped in the way and activated a shield or something. Again, I could be wrong, but I think that she was saved. So she could have died right there, and it was just bad. I mean, when my introduction to a character as important as Euphemia is, oh my gosh, you're so stupid, why would you do that? It's not good. I'm gonna try to touch briefly on Roto without giving away too much information about him, just in case. I know that this is spoiler territory, but I don't have to reveal much about him, I don't think, in order to talk about him, especially like for those of you who've seen the anime, you should know exactly who I'm talking about when I say Roto, or even if R-O-L-O, if that pronunciation is really throwing you off, you know, the young one. I didn't like him at first, mostly because I don't like when, you know, the main characters have a cool power and then someone new shows up and they completely, like, outclass them, or seem to. And so I didn't like Rolo right away because of that, because he was a show-off. And he just was barely introduced, and he was already, you know, supposedly more powerful, even if, you know, not necessarily more intelligent, but he could do more. I guess I'll say here, one of my other annoyances with this anime was that, you know, we are introduced to other Geasses, other forms of Geass, which, you know, we're not told about by Shitsu until, like, we actually run into one, I don't think. But yeah, we run into other forms of Geass. And Lelouch's, while powerful, seems so very limited because his, you know, it can only be used on one person, or, you know, once on each person. So everyone else's, you know, you could use a billion times, as many as you need, really. But his, one time per person, it just seems so limited. And the fact that he had to make eye contact kind of thing, too. It was just a bit of annoyance for me. So first, I found him annoying. I didn't like him. I wanted him to die basically as soon as possible. But then he did turn it around. And then I didn't want him to die. But he played a pretty important part in the end. So I can't fault anything for that. However, while we're on the subject of him, dang it, I did so well not spoiling anything with that, but now I am going to spoil things with him, a little bit at least. The things that I thought they took risks on at the beginning of Season 2 was that we started I was just so confused. I'll just say that. I was so bloody confused, I had no idea what was going on. Because we start off, and at the end of Season 1, you know, there's that standoff between Suzaku, Lelouch, and we see, you know, Colin standing off to the side. And what I thought was gonna happen was that, you know, Season 1's gonna end there. Season 2 is gonna open up with, like, Colin taking a shot at Suzaku, or whatever. And so Suzaku goes down, and then Colin confronts Lelouch about, you know, hey, you're Lelouch, why didn't you tell me all this time that you were Zero, kind of thing. Slaps him, whatever. They have their drama there. I thought they would leave. Someone, you know, like the Britannians would come pick up Suzaku, and the fighting would continue, basically, with more tension within the Black Knights now that Lelouch's identity was exposed. But no, Season 2 started with Lelouch just back at school, and suddenly he had a younger brother, and everything was fine, and he wasn't Zero anymore. He wasn't thinking about attacking the Britannians. He was referring to the Japanese as terrorists, kind of thing. Everything was just mixed up. He would run into, like, he ran into Colin, and he didn't seem like he knew who she was. And it turns out that he didn't. And it is explained why, of course, but just throwing the viewer into Season 2 like that, just, you know, completely confused, no idea what's going on. You do learn a little bit, I think, within the first episode, but I don't think you learn all of it. But it just threw me, before I even finished the first episode, I messaged my younger brother who introduced me to the series, and I just kind of complained to him a little bit, like, I don't think I'm liking this so far, you know, just because I felt completely out of the loop, and I didn't know if I liked the direction that it seemed to be going, but they did turn that around. However, the reason that I thought the show took risks later on was that Lelouch started to change, because I pointed out that unlike Light, Lelouch he seemed a lot more selfless, seemed like he was doing it for the good of his sister, for the good of the Japanese, you know, for the good of everyone, basically. But it starts to seem like he becomes a real, to put it kid-friendly way, you know, a real jerk. He started to just become this tyrant, and I didn't like that as much, you know? Like, I still wanted him to win because I saw Lelouch grow, you know, and I was rooting for him all this time. And it didn't, you know, it wasn't too drastic, and I didn't know if he was gonna pull something. But again, I reached the last episode of the season, and I thought, no, he is a tyrant. He's a jerk at the end. It's too late for that now. But then they did turn it around, and I am so happy for that. And this is where it gets super spoilery. If you don't want to hear the super spoilery ending part, then cover your ears until I uncover mine. Okay, so yeah, he's on his throne or whatnot as the Emperor of Britannia and all of that, and all of the terrorists, you know, the Black Knights and everything, they're set up for execution and whatnot. But then, you know, just when you think it's too late and that all's lost, Zero comes out of nowhere, you know, from the distance, and he rushes up and he kills Lelouch. And it was so sad. And you know, and so it was Suzaku as Zero, of course, because only Suzaku and the Ninja Maid could move like that. But you know, Lelouch pulls the sword out of Zero, and Zero falls and slumps down to where Nunnally, I believe, was chained. And you know, Nunnally and other people, you know, Colin and the other Black Knights, of course, they realize what had happened, and Nunnally cries out for her brother and just starts crying, and that's when I started crying. When she screamed, I lost it, you know, like it really hit me there. So it ended beautifully, I thought. It was a really good ending. And then of course just seeing Colin in the end, you know, when she goes back to school as a, you know, looking like a, well, I didn't want to say looking like Britannian, but she goes back to school, and her hair, though, is the same way as it was when she was part of the Black Knights, not when she was feigning sickness to go to school. So it's just really cool to see that subtle, but definitely, okay, maybe not subtle, it was definitely noticeable, but just that bit of change so you could see that things are getting better. Okay, that's the ending for you. But yeah, it was really good. It made me cry. It turned things around for me. It was awesome. There are kind of other characters that I want to talk about, but I feel like this video is already really long, especially for just a Let's Talk where you're listening to me talk about things you may or may not know. And so I'll try to just talk about like a few more people. So let's talk about Nina Einstein. Nina Einstein has one of the most awkward scenes. I think the most awkward scene in this anime, where you all know what I'm talking about if you've seen it. If you haven't, she basically humps a table while looking at a picture of Euphemia. It's just really awkward. Basically, Nina was being held hostage at one point by Japanese, not the Black Knights, but other Japanese, you know, like freedom fighters, basically. And Euphemia stands up for her when, you know, one of them starts picking on her. And so she fell in love with the beautiful princess kind of deal. And, you know, I'm totally fine, LGBT all the way, go for it kind of deal. She was portrayed so awkwardly. And then when Euphemia died, I wanted Nina to die too. Because, you know, she freaked out, like she actually had a psychotic breakdown, and she started building bombs, and, you know, she wanted to shoot like, it was just, Nina, I hated Nina after that point, I really did. And I don't think that I'm alone in that. I definitely think the people still liked her. I'm sure there are a number of people out there who will defend her to the end, but I did not like her. I wanted Nina gone. And again, it wasn't anything about Euphemia or the fact that she loved her or the fact that, and I understand that you're troubled by a loss, but just the way she freaked out and how just awkward she was anyway, it was just bad. And I didn't want to see her anymore in the anime. I didn't want that pollution. I'll wrap up the school kids together then, you know, with Shirley. Oh, I will talk about Shirley. I have to talk about Shirley on her own just a little bit. With Shirley, with Millie, with Rivals or Rivals or whatever you want to say, however you pronounce it. I really liked the supporting cast. You know, all the friends that they had at school, Lelouch and Suzaku and Colin and all that, all their normal school friends. They were really cool. It added this light atmosphere. It lightened the mood for sure on, many different episodes when all of this war and chaos is going on. And, it added, of course, to the fact that Lelouch, Colin, Suzaku, they really had to hide all the darker things that were going on in their lives. They were just students when they were with those, the classmates. But they really did a good job, the students, of just, it made everything fun, because you could have one episode that's just like terribly dramatic, and then you have the next episode that has really funny parts. There was one episode where like the whole time they're chasing a cat, and it's probably one of my favorite episodes just because of that part. It was just so humorous, and I didn't expect it, but at the same time, it had that charm to it, and it fit within the story. Like, it actually fit. It wasn't just random. So I really appreciated that and what those characters brought to the table. So to talk briefly about Shirley herself, well, not Shirley herself really, because it's not too much to talk about. She was a girl, she liked Lelouch, like crush on Lelouch kind of thing. Nothing much to talk about there. It was nice. She seemed like a nice enough girl, whatnot. I didn't want her with Lelouch, but I also wasn't necessarily against it. I would prefer, Colin with Lelouch, but that's probably because I prefer Colin. What I want to talk about with Shirley was the fact that she had a bit of a confrontation with Mao, and bad things happened. And basically Mao being able to read thoughts, I don't know if I spoiled that earlier, but he can read thoughts. I don't think I did. Being able to read thoughts, he basically voiced all of Shirley's biggest fears and whatnot, and kind of drove Shirley to the breaking point. And so what Lelouch did was he used his Geass on her to make her forget about him entirely. Now, I see why you would want to make her forget about some things, but making her forget about you entirely is bad, especially considering the fact that not only do you go to the same school, but you liked him for the longest time. Everyone knew that. And the fact that you're on the student council together or whatever, like the party planning committee or whatever the heck it was, like you're gonna be interacting a lot, and people are gonna see your interactions, and they're gonna know that something's up. It was only due to the fact that Millie suggested like, oh, it's just a lover's tiff kind of thing, and told everyone to go with it, that there wasn't like a bigger deal made out of that fact. But I think that in like most situations there would have been a bigger deal made out of the fact that suddenly this person genuinely doesn't seem to remember this person whom she adored at all. So I thought that that was stupid that they had Lelouch actually wipe everything about him from her mind. Like, there could have just been key bits. I really feel there could have just been key bits. Like, forget everything about me being about me not being a student. Forget everything that happened after this point. But no, he chose to go all the way, and it was just weird. Sayoko Shinozaki, who is she was the maid, the ninja maid as I called her earlier. Just talking about her briefly, she was a weird character just because of the fact that she was so socially inept, I guess. Really good at combat and everything, great for protection and whatnot, infiltration, all that good stuff. But she was sent disguised as Lelouch for a number of times, and she started, like, giving him all these different dates with, girls and everything, and normal people don't do that. It's like, how would you not know that that's weird? How? So it's just kind of weird to what extent they took that whole stunt. Just with her, just everything with her. It was weird how far they went. I really hope that I'm not missing anything big that I wanted to talk about, but I think that the last thing I have to say is just something that I kind of wanted to see. And I'm not really disappointed that it didn't happen, but it was just something that while I was watching the episodes, I'm like, oh, please let this happen, please let this happen. But after Euphemia had died, I wanted her sister and Lelouch to be fighting. After the point where, she realized that Lelouch was Lelouch. And I wanted him to have this line like, I just want to make the world better for my sister. And I want her to have the line, my sister just wanted to make the world better for everyone. Kind of thing. Just all these, all this anger and all these tears and just fighting for family. And, that didn't happen. And I was a little disappointed at the time. But, it wouldn't have really added to anything, I guess. So it's just one of those things. As I watched it, I'm like, oh, fingers crossed, and then it didn't happen. Oh well. But I still think it would have been a pretty cool line. So I think it's fair to say that there is definitely more to talk about, because there were a lot of characters. Again, with this being a 50-episode anime, there are a lot of scenes that I could talk about. But I think that I've covered everything that would kind of like bother me if I didn't say it right away. So as long as this is, I'm gonna call it here. So with all that, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. And if you did, of course, feel free to like, comment, and if you're new, even subscribe. It means a lot, it really helps me out, and I would love to have you guys. So, tune in next time for my next video. Until then, take care. Cue outro, go!